Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This week we're going to start our new module that's focused on Enscape and rendering in VR and 3D walkthroughs. But for this video I'm going to pick up where I left off last week with my little office model that I'm working on. So you can follow along sort of with what I'm doing with your own model, and then the actual model itself without any of the rendering aspects will be due by the end of this week. And then for the next 2 weeks we're basically going to be working on putting materials in and getting this thing ready to render, and then actually rendering out images from it and then putting it into our 3D walkthrough that we're going to be doing. So last week where I left off with this, I kind of just had it in its most basic form here with just the walls and the floor and the doors and windows. But now I'm gonna keep going with it, and I'm gonna add in the baseboard so you can see how I do that. And then I'm gonna put in a couple pieces of furniture, and then I'm going to jump over into the Enscape tools and kind of give you a introduction to those. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do in here is do the baseboard, which I forgot to do last week. So I'm going to start the process of doing the baseboard by going into my wall, and then I basically just want to get it to where it's at this point where the walls are kind of grouped together. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go all the way into that group so that I'm working on the actual walls themselves. And I'm going to pick all of these lines all the way around the bottom here. And I'm just going to copy those instead of redrawing them, because that's going to be a little bit easier. So all I'm going to do is select all these and go around with my control key and click on all the lines around the perimeter of the space. Like that. And then I'm going to copy them to my clipboard, Control C, and then I'm going to back out one level so that I'm back here to where I'm within the walls group, but the walls themselves are also grouped. And now I'm going to go edit and then paste in place, and that's going to leave me with just those lines right there in blue. Now what I'm going to do is right click on one of those lines, and I'm going to group those together. So again, we have a group within the group, and with those grouped I can double click on them, and now I just have those lines, and I can start doing my sweeps around the perimeter of the room. So the next step of this is going to be drawing in the actual profile of the baseboard and then sweeping it around the perimeter. So what I'm going to do to start is zoom in on one of these endpoints here, and I'm just going to start drawing in that profile. Now if you remember back to one of my previous videos, I showed you how we can use molding profiles that we get from online sources that are drawn in CAD formats, and we can bring those in and we can actually just use those, or you can just draw them yourself. Drawing them yourself sometimes is the best option, especially if it's something simple that you don't really need a crazy thing. You don't need to go get some crazy profile to kind of accomplish it. You know, some of the ones I showed you in my example are a little bit more complicated, and those would be difficult to just kind of freehand and guess. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and just guess on them. Actually, what I'm going to do is post a picture of my baseboard so that you can kind of get an idea of the profile and what I'm doing to match that just by guessing. Alright, so we did some renovations to our house, and we actually custom milled some of the same baseboard to match what we have. So I had some of that, and I just took some pictures of it. I know that you guys won't have that same luxury, but this will just give you a good idea of what I'm doing. So I just kind of highlighted the edge of this so that you can see that profile, but it's basically just a flat piece of baseboard, and then at the top they have this small detail, which is called an OG profile. So it sort of has this arcing shape and then just a flat piece and then an arc in the opposite direction of the first one. And there it is in an actual profile view. So if you had access to something like this, you could actually just take like a dead-on picture of the profile, kind of like this, and bring it in and trace over it. But I'm just going to kind of freehand it, but that just gives you sort of an idea of what I'm going to be working with. So zooming back into my little corner piece down here, I'm going to start by just drawing the profile from that endpoint. So using the pencil tool, I know that my baseboard is 7 inches tall, and about the top inch or so is going to be that OG profile. So I'm going to start by drawing the back side of the baseboard. So starting there, just drawing straight up 7 inches. And then I'm just going to make basically a rectangle and then cut the profile piece out of it after the rectangle is drawn. So this is going to be 3/4 of an inch deep. And then I'm just going to finish off the rectangle. Like that. And now that that's drawn, I can go in and start adding in that OG shape. So I know that the top inch or so is going to be that profile. So I'm going to start by taking this top line here and then copying it down 1 inch. Like that. So now I kind of can see what I'm working with. So now that I have that, I want to divide this in half to get some symmetry going. And then I basically want to start going this diagonally, because if you were to look at that profile again, in the profile view, it's actually kind of just a diagonal line that cuts down 45 degrees, but it's got those shapes in there as well. So what I need to do, well, let me think here. Yeah, I'm just going to start by putting that 45-degree line in. So that means that I have to put an endpoint here 1/4 of an inch up to make that 45 degrees. So you can see SketchUp kind of snaps there automatically. It snaps to 1/4 inch for me. So I'm going to click there to make an endpoint and then just draw up to this corner. So now I sort of have a framework for where this stuff needs to go. So basically there's going to be a arc that's curving down right here, and then a flat piece in the middle, and then an arc that curves up right here. So next what I want to do is add in that little flat segment, and this is where I'm going to guess a little bit. I'm going to assume that flat segment is about 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is just draw a line out here, sort of away from that, and I'm just going to draw it 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to highlight it and then move it to that midpoint right there. All right, now that I have that, I can start adding in my my other shapes. Well, actually what I'm going to do is highlight that again. I'm going to move it up. Move it straight up from this side. I'm going to copy it actually so that it doesn't start moving around. So that's what I mean with sticky geometry. So you can see if I don't copy that, it wants to like move everything. I can't move it now because they're tied together, so I need to copy it and delete the old one. So I'm going to copy it straight up until it intersects with that diagonal right there, and then erase this. So now what I can do is have a perfect arc from this point to this point because it's basically symmetrical. Okay, so I basically just create a square here in this top quadrant. So I should be able to use my arc tool now and go from here to here and draw that out until I get it snapping. And then basically do the same thing here. So I'm going to copy this line so that I get another reference to snap to, like that. So it's going to cut through all the way here. And I'm just going to delete out the lines I don't need anymore, so I don't need those. And now I basically just have to make the opposite like arc shape right here. So again, using my arc tool, go from here to here, and you can see now I have that reference there because I did that diagonal line. And I just want to pull this back until I get it snapping at sort of a tangent. So right there, it snaps at 1/16 of an inch. So I can click, and then I can delete out that straight line segment. And you can see I have a pretty good match to what I showed in the picture. So then I can just delete out these other reference lines and then delete out these top two pieces of the surface, and there's my profile. Alright, so now that I have my profile, I can basically just copy this shape around to all the different areas. So I'm gonna really only have to copy this one time. So I'm just gonna grab this right here, use my move tool, and copy it to the other side of this opening. So basically this profile here is going to cover these two line segments, and then we get a gap right there. And then this one is going to cover all the other segments all the way around, since they're all connected. So then I just have to use my follow me tool by first highlighting my rails or my lines that the sweep is going to follow. So that's going to be these two lines right here. And then going to tools, follow me, and then clicking on my profile. Then I'm just going to do the same thing for the other one right there, just to get all of those lines. And then again, tools, follow me, click my profile. So that's pretty good. The final thing that I need to do is actually use my push-pull tool to align this in the correct spot. So if I were to unhide this right now, if I were to click my H key and bring everything back, you can see the location currently of the baseboard. So it's intersecting with my door casing because I basically just copied the lines from the wall, which go all the way here, but this is going to have to be pulled back now so it's not intersecting with my door casing. So by unhiding that, what I can do now is just use my push-pull, and I can hover over that corner. And if it's hard to see, this is when you would use your X-ray tool. So now I can see through everything and get a better idea. So now I can see that face, click on it, and I can just drag it back until it snaps right there. Then I'll just do the same thing over here on the other side. And then I'll go to this door and do the same thing. Just as simple as that. So now my baseboard is in, and it's all grouped together, which is perfect. So if I were to bring this back to a normal view, so you can see in my walls group, I have my walls, and then I have my baseboards, and those are all nicely grouped. And then I could go in and apply these to the moldings layer. So I can just go to my entity info section over here where it says tag, and switch that over to my where is it? Moldings. Now I have a bunch of other layers in here now too because I pulled in a block, which I'm going to show you here next. Alright, so that's basically it for my modeling of the architectural elements. And now I need to start adding in a little bit of furniture and other things. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my desk that I'm currently sitting at. So I'm going to go to the 3D warehouse, and I have a Hayworth brand desk. So all I did was type in Hayworth desk, and you can see Hayworth has a bunch of different products on here that they built, so you know that they're quality and they have parameters and stuff you can mess with. but I basically just went through here and I found a desk that looked like mine. So this desk right here is what I downloaded and loaded into my project. So this looks pretty close. I have a U-shaped desk just like this, but it doesn't have this top piece on it. But since it looks close, basically what you can do is just bring it in and delete out the stuff that you don't need. So that's essentially what I'm going to do now. So I already loaded it in, so I can go over here to my components section and I can switch over to my components that are currently in the model. So click on there and it's going to take me to everything that's currently in here. And now there's a bunch of pieces here. You can see they have all these pieces that are a part of the desk, right? Because they're all individual components that are basically nested together, so it brings them all in, which is kind of annoying, but that will allow me to locate just the desk component right there and drag and drop that in. So there's just the desk by itself, which is perfect, what I need. So this is good, but there's a couple issues. First issue is it's the wrong direction. Now, you could fix this in a couple different ways. The first way would be to just rotate it around, but I have not yet shown you the kind of mirror feature that is within SketchUp. So to mirror something, what you have to do is select it and then right click on it, and then there's an option that's going to allow you to flip it along an axis. So down here at the bottom you can see it says flip along, and it says components red, green, or blue axis. So red, green, and blue, those are corresponding to the planes that you see running through the SketchUp project. So we have the red plane, the green plane, and then the blue plane, which is the vertical plane. So if I want to flip this to face the other direction, I'm going to have to either choose the red or the green plane. It's almost never going to be the blue one when you're flipping something like in a floor plan view. So I'm going to again right click on this and then go flip along, and I'm going to choose components red. Okay, so that flipped it the opposite direction, which I actually do need to, no, I don't need to do that. Yeah, so I'm going to redo that and I'm going to choose green. Sometimes I get confused on which one you actually need to select, but in this case it's going to be green. So that flips it around the correct way. And if you look at this component, you can see the right side of it is a bit deeper than the left side of it, which is exactly how my desk is. So that's the way I'm going to leave it. So now it's in place, and I kind of just need to fine tune its final placement. So I'm going to switch over to my top-down view, and then making sure I'm on camera and then parallel projection, so I see everything in a basic true floor plan view. And now I'm going to just kind of move this, and I'm going to move this so that it kind of aligns. I'll move it up here just so I can see it a little bit better. I want to get this back point here, and I'm going to move it to the left so it kind of aligns with the face of my baseboard, because that's how it would be in real life. You wouldn't want it to be up cutting through the baseboard. And I'm going to move it down to basically this corner so that it's kind of like sitting on the baseboard, in front of the baseboard. So that's pretty close. The only thing is we have a couple issues, like with the windowsills and stuff cutting through into the desk. So I'm actually going to just scale this a little bit to make it fit correctly. So if I go to my scale tool, and I'm only doing this because it's this is not the exact desk I have, so the one that I have does fit because it's made a little bit different, but I'm just gonna scale from a couple of these points to get it fitting correctly. So if I grab that point there and I just drag that to the front face of this windowsill, that's gonna just like scrunch everything down a little bit so that it sits in there nicer. And I just want to make sure that it's not, so you're not going to see that sill anyway, so I'm just going to leave that as is on that side. So that's the nice thing about SketchUp, is if something like doesn't fit correctly, it's very easy to modify the size of it because you can just manually like scale things in any direction that you want. Whereas in Revit, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that very easily. So there's my desk. And then the next part of this would be adding in things like my computer on my desk, and then like my desk chair. And then over in this corner right here, I have a little bookcase that's set up right now. So I need to add in those things. But to do that, I'm now going to switch over to Enscape and kind of show you some of the tools that Enscape has built into it as part of our introduction to Enscape, which is really cool. So in your file, what you're going to want to do after you've downloaded Enscape, which I'm going to be posting the instructions to that on the module page, right? It's just a link that you go to, and it's going to ask you if you want a student license. Actually, I'll just pull up the website really quick so you can. All right, so if you just go on Google and you type in Enscape student license, it's just going to pull up this page. It's going to be like the first link, and you just have to go here to get my EDU license. You're going to put in some information about yourself, like your school and your name and your email address and stuff. And then they're going to verify that you're a student, and they're going to send you a license for Enscape. All right. And then after they do that, you're just going to take the license code that they email to you, and you're going to be entering that code within either SketchUp or Revit to actually verify it and start using the application. But all you need to do is just go here and download the free license for being a student. All right, but once we're back in SketchUp, the first thing you need to do is on your toolbar here, right click, and then you need to enable the Enscape tools. So I'm just going to click once, and that's going to bring up Enscape, and then you can just drag this and drop it onto your toolbar. That should be the only thing that you need to do within here. But once you have the toolbar up, if you want to go ahead and verify your license, you just want to go here to, it's either the About or the Settings. So maybe it's under Settings. Kind of move things around. So General Settings, Licensing, and Privacy. You can go in here and enter license key, and you can copy the code that they send you in the email, and you paste it right here, and then you click Apply License, and it's going to verify, and it's going to let you use the actual software then. So I have a student license right now, and that's all you have to do. So it's really easy. So after you've done that, basically what we want to do is take a look at their asset library. So Enscape is not only just a rendering plugin for producing the images, but they also have a built-in library of their own entourage and models that you can very easily just drag and drop in. And these models are high quality. They look really nice when they're rendered. They're easy because they're just drag and drop. And I forget the last thing I was going to say about them. But yeah, you can just click on here and you can go and see what they have and just drag them directly into your model. And they're constantly updating this. So when they first released this, they only had like, I don't know, maybe 50 models. But now you can see over the last couple of years since they released the asset library, it's now up to 2,520 models. So there's a ton of stuff in here, and you can kind of filter it down by what you're looking for, or you can even search. So in my case, I want to search for first thing being a computer, the second thing being a bookcase. And I just want to see what they have so I can drag it in here. So let me try computer. And that's going to filter it down a little bit, and then I'll just wait for these to load to see what they got. Okay, so they finished loading, and you can see they have 5 different computers in here. So they have a couple on like mobile carts, and then they have a couple that are more typical. Here's one that's basically just an iMac. But then this one right here is basically what I have. So all you have to do is drag and drop it into the viewport. And you can also favorite these. So if you're going to be using them for multiple projects and you always use the same standard, component, like say you're always going to be doing a bunch of offices and you always need computers, you can just favorite this so you have easy access to all the ones that you use a lot. But I can just click on this and then just drag it and drop it in, and it should just sit right on top of my desk right there, which is nice. And I'm going to change my face style so I can see this a little bit. Okay, so that already is set to shaded. Yeah, but basically I can just take this and move it to get it lined up with where it should be sitting. Another thing that I have over here in this corner is I have a little coffee maker. So I can see if they have something that's like a coffee maker that I can put in there, like a Keurig. So I'm just going to type in coffee and see what pops up. All right, so they don't have a coffee maker like the one that I have. They do have this one, which is not really a Keurig, but I could use it if I wanted to. But if you need something specific, this would be a case where you could just jump over to the 3D warehouse and see what they have in there. So I can just type in Keurig. And perfect. They have all kinds of different Keurigs in here. So there used to be a setting somewhere in here where you could view the number of times things have been downloaded, and I'm not sure where they moved that to, but the nice thing about that is it kind of let you see what was like a popular model, because some of them, when you download them and load them in, they might look good in this thumbnail, but then they're actually like really crappy. So if you're able to filter it out by like popularity, it just makes it a little bit easier, but I'm not sure where they put that, which is annoying. There we go, popularity. So you can filter by popularity, and that's gonna do it. So now I can see that this is like the most popular one right there, and then I think this one probably looks a little bit better though. So I'm gonna try this one. And then I can just plop it right there. Let's rotate it around 180 degrees, and then I have it sitting 45 degrees in the corner, so I'm just going to rotate this now 45 degrees like that, and then just sit it over here in my corner like that, which is perfect. So that's really what a lot of this is. Whenever you're filling these scenes with things to render, it's just either jumping between the asset browser that they have for Enscape, and this is going to be sort of the go-to spot because the stuff is going to be all ready to render and have nice materials and everything. The stuff from the SketchUp store, you can find decent stuff on there, but when you go to render it, it might not look amazing, and you might have to do some tweaks to the materials and stuff to get them like actually looking the way that you want them to. So there's a coffee maker. Next I'm going to see if they have a desk chair. So let's try chair. And you can kind of see the complexity that some of these models have, a lot of very organic details, which you're not going to be able to find from things that are within the SketchUp store natively. So I'm not actually sure how Enscape does it, but they have their own like thing that loads in these models externally, and the models have like a bunch more detail than the ones that you can get from SketchUp. So definitely if you can find something usable in here for your projects, just use it, because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And it's just really quick. Like, it's just a matter of bringing this up and then dragging and dropping, and it already looks nice, and you don't really have to do a bunch of work to it, like making custom leather materials and wood materials and all that kind of stuff. It's just ready to go. The only bad thing about it is it's a little bit harder to customize. I don't think right now, at least, you can change the materials or colors that are assigned to these. So that is something that's annoying. But if you only have like one or two of them, you could just Photoshop the color to be something different after it's already rendered. So really it's kind of up to you. So I have a desk chair that, yeah, looks something like that. So just an office chair. So I think this is what I'm going to go ahead and use. So we'll just drag that and drop it right there. And then I'm just going to rotate that around 90 degrees and then move it to where it needs to be. So swap to my top-down view to get a little bit better of a perspective on this, and then put it right in front of the computer like that. Perfect. So then the last thing I'm going to do is put in my little bookcase right here. So hopefully Enscape has something for that as well. So I'm going to type in bookcase, or maybe bookshelf. Let's just try seeing what furniture they have, maybe. Furniture. They have a ton of furniture. So shelf, okay, so there's some. Not quite what I have, but one of these will probably work just fine. Because I'd rather not pull from the warehouse if I don't have to. I'm just going to try this one. That's a little bit bigger than the one I actually have, but that's all right. Rotate that around. And place it in the correct spot. So this is where I have it currently. And yes, it actually does stick out in front of the door like that, which is not great. So actually for this, maybe I will just rotate it around and put it on the other wall, just for the sake of the assignment. Something like that. So that's the nice thing about SketchUp too, is you can really easily move things around and get these perspectives and see sort of like how things fit into the room, and you can do a bunch of different like layouts and concepts very simply. All right, so there's an empty bookcase. So the next thing would maybe be to drop some books on there. It all depends on how far you want to go with things. So the more effort and time you put into it and detail you put into it, obviously the better, but you don't always have to. So I'm just going to see what books they have in here. So you can see they have a bunch of books already built in, and you can just drag these in and throw them on the shelves to make it look like there's a lot going on. All right, so I can just plop those there in place. And now you can see, because of the way they are, I can't really tell what they look like. So this stuff doesn't look great in the viewport by itself, the Enscape assets. They look good once you open Enscape and start rendering them. All right, so that's a little bit of a difference. So if you're going to be viewing something just in a SketchUp view like this in your viewport, anything from the 3D warehouse is going to look better in those views. Like the Keurig, for example, it actually looks like a Keurig. Anything else from Enscape is not going to look as nice in these viewports because basically they're just blobs, and then once you pull in the renderer, it's going to swap out the blobs for like high detailed models. All right. If they were to have that high of detail models just in the viewport, SketchUp wouldn't be able to handle it and it would crash because it's so much detail and stuff. So that's the way that they kind of get around that, is they just have these basic representations. So I'm just going to leave one on the bookcase, and then when we render it, we'll be able to get a better idea of what it actually looks like, and then I can move it around and adjust it based off of that to see if it's oriented correctly. So that's kind of it for my entourage. So I'm going to save this really quick, and then I'm going to hop over to actually looking at it in Enscape so that I can get sort of like a initial sense of how everything is coming together. So let me just pause this really quickly. All right, so I had to save everything because I'm working on a computer that I don't typically work on. It's not the one that I had last year, so it's not as powerful. So I'm kind of worried that when I launch Enscape on this, it's going to maybe crash something, especially while I'm recording the lecture. So just to be safe, I had to pause and save everything I was doing. But now I'm going to launch Enscape, and hopefully everything works out okay. So to start Enscape, you just want to click on this button right here that says Start Enscape, and that's going to load up Enscape into a separate viewport. So we'll just give that a minute to load. All right, so there we go. So it loaded up, and we can get a look inside our model. So I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. So the controls for this are clicking and holding on your left mouse button is going to let you kind of orbit around and just look around you. And then holding the middle mouse button down is going to allow you to pan from side to side. And here you can see all the actual controls for this. You're going to be using your arrow keys a lot and your space bar a lot. So space bar is going to allow you to drop down on the ground level. So when I click on that and inside the room, it drops me into the room, and I can kind of look around now and see everything. All right. And I can actually see now that my books are in the correct position, which is perfect. But you can see how those get swapped out now with a lot higher quality stuff, and even like the computer screen. So that all gets replaced with actual materials and something that's on the screen, so it looks a lot better. But this is when you would want to go in and go back and forth between here and SketchUp, and then kind of refine how everything is looking. So something I'm going to do is kind of get an idea how this looks with the ceiling on, so that I can see how much light is actually coming into the space. So I'm going to go back to my SketchUp view and then activate my ceiling layer so that I can get a little bit better of an idea. Then once I've done this, I can play around with my sunlight to get that oriented in a different position that lets more light in. So to do that, you want to hold the Shift key, and on your right mouse button, you just want to click and drag that from side to side, and you're going to see that little sun indicator appear at the bottom right. And as you move this from one side to the other, you'll be able to change the time of day and bring more light into the space and get interesting shadow effects. But this is obviously super basic right now because I don't have any materials applied to anything. I'm going to be working on materials a little bit next, but I just wanted to get a basic idea of how everything is looking. So within here, you're going to want to make some adjustments also as you go. So if you go up here at the top right, you have this setting that says visual settings. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to pop up another window. So within the visual settings, you have a bunch of different options. First, we have the outlines, and if we drag that up a little bit, you can see that's going to add some outlines to all of our geometry, so I can kind of see everything, even though there's no materials on them, and they're all just white and they blend in. Now I get some definition to my doors, and I can actually see that geometry instead of just looking totally flat, which is really nice. That also gives it more of like a sketched look, which if you like that look, you can turn those on and have it look just a little bit less realistic, but more of a, it'll make it look more like a concept essentially, which is kind of a cool look. We also have exposure. That's going to allow us to kind of globally brighten or darken the scene. So if it looks really dark in here, we can amp up the exposure, and that's going to brighten everything. We have field of view. So what field of view does is it lets you kind of see more of the image, but it's going to distort it the higher that you make it. So the default they have in here is 90. A human eye field of view is something more around 60. So something around here where you're cutting off a lot more of the view. But it also, it's more of a natural view, okay? So this is kind of like what we would see in our vision. Like this is our cone of vision, basically. So something around 60 is going to be more realistic for human eye. But if you want to fit more into the scene, you could ramp this up. But you can see as I ramp this up all the way, it really distorts things, and it makes it look a lot, it makes the space look a lot bigger than it is in reality. So you really want to avoid having a really high field of view on renderings, because a lot of people see that as deceptive, because if you were to do that for a real space and show it to a client, they might think, oh wow, this is a huge room, when in reality this room I'm showing you right here is just a tiny little office in my house. Like it's not very big, but pulling this way up makes it look like it's massive. All right, so you really want to avoid that. One, it distorts your view and makes it look really weird, and two, it's not going to be super representative of reality. So 90 is the default, and I wouldn't really recommend going beyond 90. But if you want to go lower down to something like 60, that's even a little bit more realistic and what you would actually see in real life, then you could do that. They have other settings here like depth of field, which will like blur out different areas of the image. Like you can set it to like focus on a specific point and blur everything else out. I don't really use that too much, but you can play with it if you want to. And then we have our rendering quality. Right now mine is set to high, but I could ramp this up higher if I wanted to. But this is going to be a setting that you choose based on your computer. So some people's computers can handle the ultra setting, but some people's can't. And if you ramp it up higher, it's going to make it run a little bit slower because it's going to be using more computational resources. So as you're kind of just working around in here, you might want to leave it set to a lower setting so that you can kind of manage things and jump around and it not be laggy. So now that I've turned this up higher, it's going to try to make a higher quality image, but you can see like it's getting really slow and it's not letting me like move my mouse cursor around because the computer that I'm using is like pretty old. This is the computer that I bought when I went into the interior design program in 2013. So it kind of struggles a little bit now with this newer software. But after that loads, you can see now I can like move it around okay. But if I wanted this to be like a little bit snappier and work a little bit quicker, I could dial that down a bit and just work on the high setting and then change it later when I'm actually rendering if I wanted to. And then we can go and do a bunch of different image corrections on this tab. So you could toggle on an auto contrast, and that would kind of like change this for you automatically, but I usually like to leave that off and just do it manually. So we have things like highlights. So any of the bright spots in the room, that's what that's going to control. Shadows is going to control how dark your shadows are. So anything that's dark, you can see that's going up and down. Saturation is just how saturated are the colors. So this is totally desaturated and then fully saturated. Color temperature is going to change how warm or cool the overall image looks. So you can play around with that. Effects like motion blur, that's just if you're moving around in the space, like from left to right, how much is that going to blur the camera? I usually turn that all the way off because it's annoying. Bloom, that's having to do with your lighting. So if you were to adjust the bloom, you can see it makes it look more like realistic sunlight streaming through and kind of blinding you. So you can make that like go really way up if you wanted to, but the more you do that, the more it's going to soften the overall image and make it, you're going to lose some details. So use that sparingly. Vignette, so that's going to be darkness around the borders of the image. So you can see as I do that, I kind of get that dark vignetting around the edges. It's okay to do this just a little bit. Really, you want to do this to kind of focus the attention on a specific point in the image. So if I wanted to, maybe the computer in this example is the most important thing in this room and I wanted you to focus on that, you could turn up the vignetting and it kind of like draws your focus into the center of the image, but you don't want to go too crazy on that. Chromatic aberration, that's kind of just a weird effect that I'm not sure you're going to be able to see or not. It's really around the edges of things. It kind of like makes them look a little bit fuzzy. I usually just turn that all the way off because it doesn't really make things look any better. And then over on the atmosphere tab, we have fog. So you can see as I do that in the background, I get this fog effect and my horizon's kind of fading out. Fog height, that just controls the location of the fog. Illumination, so our sun brightness is going to control how bright that sunshine is coming in. So you can play around with that and you can see the sunlight becomes more intense and I can see less of my background the more that I amp up that sun brightness there. And if you turn it all the way down, it will totally just get rid of all the sunlight. So you just want to find a good setting for that. Night sky, so you can actually make it nighttime if you were to hold your shift key and drag all the way to the right till it gets dark out. And this isn't going to show, there we go. So now it's technically nighttime and I'm not sure why it's doing this weird like lighting thing, but you can control kind of like how bright the sky is at nighttime. But I don't ever really make mine nighttime. Oh, so that's cool. So if you go all the way nighttime, you can see now the computer screen actually turns on and it looks like it's glowing, which is pretty neat. So that's an Enscape feature that they have built into it, which is cool. So I'm going to make it daytime again. And it's doing some weird rendering things on my computer. Just like I said, like my computer is really old, so when I had my old computer it did not do this. Everything worked a lot smoother. But artificial light brightness, if we had artificial lights in the scene, which I do not have any in here right now, those would control those. So like any recessed can lights or pendant lights, that's what that would control. Ambient brightness, that's just going to be like your shadows and stuff around the edges of the room. So you can see when I turn that down, now everything like kind of under the desk gets a lot darker and more shadowy, which is kind of cool. It makes it a little bit more realistic and gives you more contrast. So I kind of like to play around with that and maybe turn it down to make it a little bit darker. Wind, this is really only if you're like rendering out videos and stuff and have like trees in your scene. Over here on sky, we can set it to be a white background, so that just gets rid of our horizon and makes everything white. So That's good for if you want to add in your own background later on, like in Photoshop or something. You can just set this to a white background, and then you can slide in your image behind here within the window, which is cool. So I'm going to turn that back off. Then we have our horizon. So if you were to toggle this down, you get all kind of presets. So these are like basically your backgrounds. So by default, it's set to white ground, but then we also have this one called clear, which is going to just be this kind of like gray background out there. Skybox, that's going to let you insert your own custom image if you want to, but those are kind of finicky and hard to do. So I don't really mess with those. I usually just Photoshop in my backgrounds if I need to afterwards. Desert, they're kind of hard to see right now because of how I have my exposure setting. If I turn this down, you can see them a lot better. So there's the desert, forest. Some of them aren't the best quality, but if you just want something very basic in the background, it'll get the job done. Mountains. And then you can actually rotate these too. So there's a bunch of different areas within the image itself. So you can use this rotation setting and actually move it around in the background. Construction site, town. So some buildings and stuff. If I were to go out here, you could see it. So that's kind of like what your background is, and it just surrounds the entire scene. And you're only seeing a little piece of it from your windows inside. Urban, which is just like a city. And then we have like just our abstract ones, so white cubes and then white ground, which is what it's set to. But yeah, I usually just leave it at something like this because I'm not crazy about the way those backgrounds look. But sometimes what I'll do is I will set it to like a background that's close. So like maybe this one where I just want like something out in the distance. And then I will use my fog tool, so the fog intensity, to kind of like fade it out. So like it's very, like you get a very subtle amount of it, and it's not really, it's just something there in the background, which looks okay. So that's one way you could do it too. And then that fog height, that's just going to move your fog like up or down. It's not really doing too much in this case. But yeah, so those are your sky settings and your backgrounds. You can also add in clouds. So if we go back out here and you look up, you can see we have clouds, and you can dynamically change those to have more or less and kind of block out the sun. Let me turn off my fog so we can see it. So that's with the fog off. You can see it a lot clearer. So cloud density, which is nice. You can change the different types of clouds that you have in there. There's all kinds of things you can do. But that's one way too, if you're on an interior scene and you're trying to tweak this interior so like the sunlight just looks just right, you can actually use those clouds and block out some of the sunlight. So if I were to, as I mess with that cloud setting, it's going to actually kind of change the effect of the sunlight in here. So you can see like it's a little bit less sunshine now as I turn that all the way up. But then if I were to toggle the density down, I get more sunshine. So it's just more ways of you being able to customize this and make it look a little bit better. So the final screen that we have here is output. So output is going to let us control the resolution at which we render things. So by default, we have a full HD resolution, which is 1920 by 1080. So that's just a pretty typical good quality image. But you can also go lower than that, which I wouldn't really recommend going lower than full HD ever. But then you can also go Ultra HD, which is really, really high quality. And that's going to be good for if you're actually printing these out like onto poster boards and stuff. So the renderings are going to have a lot of really good resolution, and you'll be able to blow up those images really large without losing a lot of detail. So Ultra HD is a really good way to render these, but you don't really always have to go that far with it if you don't want to. It just depends. It's also going to use a lot more computational resources from your computer. So if you have like a weaker computer spec-wise and you try to render Ultra HD, you might run into problems. It might crash or freeze or take a long time. So you'll want to just kind of play around with these and maybe try it and see what you get with it, and then dial it back if it's not really working the way that you intended it to. But yeah, that's it for the kind of visual settings that we have here. So really, my workflow is to start putting things into the scene, come into the visual settings, kind of mess with my brightness, get the brightness looking appropriate in a way where I can kind of like see what's going on in the scene. And then after I do that, I'll come back in to my SketchUp model and I'll make adjustments based on what I am seeing within Enscape. So something like that, where I can just really clearly see how everything is looking in the model. So now, at this point, I know that I need to start going in here and adding in some materials to my geometry to get everything to the next level. All right, so I'm just going to make a couple of materials and I'm going to kind of show you that workflow, and then I'm going to cut off the video and then I will let you continue on and do some of your own. But I'm going to just kind of give you a taste of what that material workflow looks like. So let me hop over back to SketchUp here, my regular viewport, and I'm going to turn my ceiling back off, and I'm also going to, let me think here, if they must have changed this. I want to pause the live updates so that SketchUp is not like constantly running. They used to have a button that would allow you to pause Enscape so that it's not like constantly updating in the background. All right, so this button right here, live updates, if you turn that off, it's going to save some computer resources. And so like if I made a change here now, like if I deleted my bookcase and then went back to Enscape, and I turned and looked at my bookcase, you can see it's still there because I have it set to like not be synchronized with what's in the model. So if I now click synchronize and then go back, it's going to update. So the reason that I, again, do that, turn that off, is so that it's not using as many resources to like constantly update things. So if you have a really good computer, again, you might not have to worry about that. It's really nice, especially if you have two monitors. So the way that I work professionally in Enscape is I have one monitor with just the Enscape window up, and then my SketchUp model right here on this window in front of me. And I will be making changes in SketchUp and then having this toggled on to see the live updates so that I can automatically see what I'm doing and how that's looking in Enscape in real time. So that's really nice, and that's really how you should use it. But again, if you're just on one monitor and your computer's not the best, you might want to turn that off. So at this point, what I would do is I would go in and I would start blocking out sort of the materials that I'm going to be putting on everything. Now, Enscape also, this is a new thing that they have. They have a material library. And I've never used this before, so I'm kind of curious to see what they have. But if we click on this, it's going to open up the material library here, and you can see they have all kinds of stuff that's already made, which is really, really nice. I wish that they would have had this a long time ago when I was using Enscape more. And also something that you can do, I'm pretty sure, is you can make your own materials within Enscape and then save them and then re-import them and make your own library for future use, which is really, really nice. So you're not going to be redoing things all the time. But you can also probably start with one of these and then tweak it and make it your own. So if you know that you have a fabric or a carpet or something, you could start with one of these ones that they have built in here and then go in and edit the image of it. I'm not 100% sure that that's the case, but we're going to find out pretty quickly. So I'm going to give this a shot. So I'm just going to apply a carpet material and see what happens. Oh, I see. So what we're going to be doing is selecting the thing that we want, and then it's going to load it into the project. So let me click on this and then import it to the project. Okay, sure. All right, cool. So it loaded that one in. Now if I go over here to the right side, okay, it's yelling at me for some reason. Okay, I got to close out of this window now. Now if I go over here to the right side, I should be able to find my materials section, which is up here. And there's the carpet material that Enscape brought in. So it's already selected. So if I go to this little drop down right here and I switch to in model, that's going to show me all the materials that are currently within my model. And there's a bunch of junk in here that comes in by default with some of those assets that were loaded in. So you can ignore those, but in this case, I want this carpet, so I can just click on that. Oh yeah, you just click on it one time, and then you can apply it to objects. So I'm going to double click to get my floor, and I'm only going to apply this to this top face right here. So I'm going to click on the thumbnail here and then click here, and that's going to apply that carpet material to my carpet, just like that. Then I can switch over to my live updates and check what it's looking like in Enscape and see if I like it or not. So it's okay. It's not really what my carpet looks like. Let's see if we can tweak it a little bit. So another thing that you have within Enscape is the material editor. So what we're looking at right here is SketchUp's material editor, which is not great. So if you were to click on a material and click on edit, these are the settings that you get to tweak that material, and there's just not a lot that you can do with it. So to fix that, Enscape has their own material editor. So if I click on this, all the materials that you're seeing right here are going to appear over here within the material editor of Enscape. And we have a lot more control over how everything is looking. All right, so here is our base texture. So that's just the image of our carpet. Then we also get things like height map. So a height map is going to make things look three-dimensional, right? If you remember back to Digital Apps 1, when I kind of covered materials, I talked about height maps and bump maps, and that's basically what this is. You can adjust the intensity of this, and you can basically make it look more 3D or less 3D. We have this thing called tint color, which is basically going to apply a filter over the image file. So if you wanted to change the color of something, you could just apply a tint to it and you could change it that way. So if I were to just do something crazy and then go back to here and look at that, you can see now it's overlaid like an aqua color on top of the carpet, which It doesn't look great, but you see the point. You can use a tint and you can very easily modify how that's looking. Now, I'm wondering if it might be better if I go ahead and just use another carpet material that's more of a neutral and then apply a tint to that to kind of get the color that I need. So I'm going to switch back to the material library and let's see if we can find that carpet again under fabric. I'm going to try importing both of these and see what happens. So there's carpet 3. Switch back to my group here and put that one in. And then let's go back to Enscape. All right, so it's all right. It's kind of gray. Mine is more of a like tan color. So I'm going to pull the editor back up. And it would be really nice if I could view both of these at the same time. So let me see if I can. Yeah, let's do that. And now, hopefully, so I have to, okay, so since this is part of SketchUp, I have to make SketchUp minimized like that. So I have them kind of side by side now. And now I should be able to work on this and see the changes in real time. So for the height map, so to illustrate what this does, so if you look here, you can see as the sunlight comes in and goes across the carpet, you can see all the little shadows that are created by the bumps in the carpet. But if I were to turn that all the way down, you can see what that does. So now it's totally flat and there's none of that definition. So that's what this normal map or bump map does. It makes it look more three-dimensional and realistic. I'm going to apply a slight tint to this to kind of get it to be a tan. So that's like really over the top. If I click on this and click on advanced, I can then control this a little bit better. So here I actually have like a full color thing I can play around with, and I can drag this and kind of desaturate it a little bit to get something more in line with what I have. Something like that's better. That's a lot more closer to what I actually have in reality. So I'm going to stick with that. And then we have other settings too, which I'll go into in more detail later on when we get to something more relevant for them. But you can also turn these into different types of material. So right now, this is set to just a generic material. This one, so they have a carpet. I'm curious what that would do. Okay, so a carpet is basically going to make it look like a shag carpet, I guess. Actually, that looks more like grass. So, let's see if I turn that all the way down. So that's obviously bad. But you have different ones here. So like you can have a self-illuminated, foliage, clear coat. You can make water. So now it just looks like a pool of water. But you can do all kinds of like crazy things with it. But obviously we're just going to leave that as generic. Oh, good. It undid everything that I did. All right, let's try a different carpet material instead. Carpet 4. I'm going to load the other one back in here because I don't really particularly like that. Carpet 3. Import. Okay, so it made a copy of carpet 3. And I'm going to apply this now. Let's go back to my Enscape view. And then bring up my material editor. And let's switch that color back to the way it was. Just like that. You also have this roughness setting, which is going to make things look more or less reflective. So if I were to drag this roughness down, it's going to make this look very glossy. I'm not sure it's gonna really be super evident. So 0 roughness is basically like perfectly polished glass. 100% roughness is like carpet, like what you're saying, like there's no reflection to it whatsoever. With the carpet material, it's kind of harder to see that, but if I do like this wood material for the desk, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. So I'm going to switch over to like a wood now, and we'll see what they have for that. So pull that back up and go to wood. So they have wood flooring. And as you're doing your own, feel free to play with any materials you want. Like, you don't need to match exactly what's in the space. Like, if you want to make it look a little bit better and like redesign it with different materials, you can do that too, and I'm fine with that. So these aren't loading in. I'm just gonna import a wood floor, and I'm gonna put it on the floor and see what that looks like. So let me click on this. Oh, gotta close that back out. Let me click on this now and apply it, and we'll see what that does. All right, and now if I were to go in and mess with my roughness, you'll be able to see a lot better on this example. So there you can see all the reflections, and now it looks like it's really glossy. And the specular setting, let me do that again. Specular setting is going to adjust sort of the intensity of that reflection. Right, so if there's no specular, you're not getting any of the extra reflections, but if you turn it all the way up, you're getting like all the reflections. But you can just mess around with this setting and get it somewhere that like looks realistic based on the actual finish of the floor. And there again, you can also see that normal map, which is causing the height variance. So if that's turned down all the way, the floor doesn't look nearly as good because it doesn't have that extra definition in it. But if you turn it up all the way, like, it's really gonna exaggerate those lines, and the light is basically gonna catch on all those different lines as it comes through and make it look more realistic. So that's why you want to be using multiple different map types. And whenever you download textures, so last year when I kind of introduced textures, I showed a website called SketchUp Texture Club, and that's a really good site for getting materials that you want to use, and they include all these different map types. So you're going to have the base color, or albedo, that's another word for it, and then you'll also have like a height map or a normal map. If you have the option to get a normal map, which is this purple colored map instead of a bump map, which is like more of a grayscale color, you should always get a normal map because they're just going to look a little bit more realistic. But all of that can be done through a website, so you can download them. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another video alongside this. If not this week, I'm going to add it in next week, which is going to go more in detail on how to do like advanced materials just on your own from scratch. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be a part of next week's videos because I don't know that I'll have time to get to it this week. So for this week, I would recommend probably just playing around with what is in here in Enscape natively because they do have a lot of stuff and it's really easy to kind of use. So another thing I'm going to show you really quickly with these materials is the ability to transform them in custom ways, which is really cool. This is something you can do in SketchUp super easily, but it's a lot harder to do within like a program like Revit. So if I am within my group here for my flooring and I want to maybe change the direction of this wood, let's say for some reason I wanted this wood to run 45 degrees instead of 90 degrees through the room, or I wanted it to run in the other direction, okay? What you can do is right click on this. You first want to get into the group, select the face, right click, and then go to texture and then position. So now that we've done that, basically we have these 4 points here. And within these points is just one tile of the texture. So if you remember seamless textures we've talked about before, basically that means you're going to take one image of a texture and then it's going to tile it over and over and over again. And you want to make sure that the image has no like visible seams in it, that when it tiles from one to the next, it looks natural and there's no like abrupt change. Okay, so we have these 4 icons around one tile of our image. What we can do with this is transform it now. So I can use my green pin here. This is for rotate. And I can click on this and I can start dragging it and rotating it and also scaling it. So if you drag inward to outward, it's going to scale it up and down. If you leave it on the blue dot, so you can see these blue dots here, that's going to keep it at the same scale that it was natively. If you were to hold your shift key, that's going to start distorting it weirdly, which I'm not going to do. I'm just going to click escape to undo that. But if you rotate this, and it'll snap to like increments. So now it's snapped to 45 degrees. And then I release it and then click enter. Now it's set to 45 degrees. And I can go back here and look at my Enscape. And now that's rotated 45 degrees, which is really cool. But again, if you were to go back and mess with the texture, I want to undo that. Texture position. You have other tools, like you can move it where it is within the room. So for a wood floor, this isn't going to matter as much, like the location of like the lines and stuff. For other things, it would matter. In this case, it wouldn't. But you have ones to distort it, and this one is to scale and shear. So that's going to like distort it this way. And then this one's going to like distort it like in a crazy way and like put like a false perspective on it. So let me just see what that looks like. So Enscape doesn't even know what to do with that. So you don't really want to like distort it typically, but you can if you want to. But then if you want to undo your changes, you can again select it, right click, and then click on reset position, and that's going to set it back to the way it was. So the most common use case for this would be to kind of rotate the direction. So if I wanted the floor to run in the other direction, I could go to texture, position, and then rotate this 90 degrees like that. That's not right. Undo that. Oh, it's because I set it to 45, so now it's snapping to texture, reset position. All right, texture, position, rotate 90 like that. So now it's running in the other direction. Right, so that's the most common use case for using the texture transform. You can also control that through the material editor within Enscape. So if you were to go here and then click on the actual image, so there's the image file it takes me to. We have other things we can control here, like the scale and the brightness of the image, right? But then there's rotation. So this would be to globally rotate it throughout the entire project. So if you were to apply this material in several places and then decide, I want to rotate all of the materials everywhere in a different direction, that's when you would do this. So you'd want to rotate that one 90 and then go to your normal map and then do the same thing here where you rotate it 90. And that's going to flip it in the other direction, right? So that's kind of like, if you think back to Revit, it's like a type parameter where it's doing it globally throughout the entire project, but then we can also go in and individually do it on a case-by-case basis. So if you were to go in here and again select this, you can click on Make Unique Texture, and that's basically going to take this texture right here and separate it from any other texture where it exists throughout the rest of the project. So now you can transform this one in a different way. You can rotate it in a different direction if you wanted to, and it's not going to affect any of the other ones within the rest of the project. So if I had 2 rooms with 2 different floorings and one's going one way and one's going the other way, but they're the same material, I could control them individually, which is really cool. All right, I guess the final thing is I'll show you how to import materials for one custom material. So I'll maybe do like I'll do a material for the top of the desk here and show you how that works. And then I'm gonna leave the video there and then let you guys work on your own project for next week. So let me pull up my files and show you how to load. All right, so now I'm gonna make a wood material for the top of the desk here. So I have a couple of image files that I use for wood commonly that I'm going to be basing this material off of. So I'm just going to pop one of these open really quick so you can see kind of what the texture looks like. So this is the wood texture that I'm going to be using. And then it also has a normal map as well, which looks like this. And this is what's going to be giving us that kind of 3D effect to the material. I'll upload these to the Brightspace, or not Brightspace, the Canvas page if you want to use them as well for your own projects, because it's a pretty good looking wood texture. But all I need to do to make this is I'm going to go here into the model of the desk, and then I'm going to use my sample paint tool, and I just want to see what material is applied to this currently. So, okay, so it just has the default material to it. Sometimes they apply different materials to this so that you can kind of edit it easier. So that means what I need to do is go into each of these groups, and I just need to get all of the surfaces of this desk here. This might be a little bit tricky because you can see there's a bunch of geometry here, but we're just going to have to do what we can. So what I want to do is basically go to a elevation view of this to where I can just see the top part of the desk like that. And actually, I wonder if I triple click on this. All right, so that's going to be the easiest way. If I triple click on it, I can just select it right away. I thought I was going to have to do like a window around it, but I guess we don't have to. So I'm going to triple click on that, and I'm just going to group this together since it's not. And then I'm going to go into that group so that I'm working only on the desk, or the top of the desk. So now what I want to do is basically just apply a basic material to it that I can edit later. So the way I usually do this is I go here within my material editor and I click on the drop down and I just go to colors, and then I find a color that's kind of close to what I want. So, you know, it's going to be like a brownish color, so I'll just pick this one. And then I'm going to select everything and apply that brown color to everything. All right. And then this brown color is what we're going to be using to make the wood. So now I'm going to rename this brown color to be, I don't know, oak wood or something like that. And now that that's renamed, I can start going into the material editor and I can adjust it. So that appears right here within the material editor. And what I need to do now is go back to this screen and start loading in those textures. So if I click on the thing for the texture here and I go to my materials and select my texture, I can open that and load it in. And then if I go to the bump map and I switch that to normal map, I can do the same thing with the normal map. And then there's the normal map right there. And then I can load that one in as well. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is this texture is not going in the correct direction for the wood grain. So I want to go to my material here, and I'm just going to universally, like I said, rotate the texture around. So I'm going to click on where it says explicit texture transformation, and then I'm going to type in a value of 90 for that. And I think that should do, yes, that does the normal map as well. And then here is where you actually can scale this. So I want the wood grain to be like a little bit bigger than what it is right now. So I might bump this up to like 1 meter by 1 meter. And then we should see the effects of that update in the background. So there it is, just a little bit bigger. So that's still not. Let me try that again. I don't know why it didn't take my settings that I put in, 90 and 1 by 1. Oh, I keep accidentally hitting that button. That's very annoying. 90, 1 by 1. All right, then I'm going to just click back, and hopefully if I don't touch it, it'll update. So I'm not sure why that is not updating. Try rotating it more. See if that does anything. So I might have to just do it manually. I am not sure why that would not. Usually it will just rotate. But for some reason, this one is just not doing what I need it to. Another thing I need to do is actually fix what's happening at the corners here. So you can see how these faces are like blue colored, and that's because they're backwards. So I haven't talked about this previously, but within SketchUp, you have two sides to your faces. You have a white side and a blue side, and the blue side means that your things are backwards. So if you ever see that, you need to select them, and then once they're selected, you right click and you go to reverse faces, and that's going to make them look correct. So I'm just going to go around and do that for each of these. Reverse faces. Like that. And then I think that's all of them. All right, so that looks good. And then I can do that trick where I smooth out the facets. So if you triple click on this and then go to, where is it? Got rid of my setting. So if I go to my tray and then turn on soften edges, and then I dial that number all the way down here up slightly, it's going to hide those edges and soften them. So the material's still not going the way that I want it to. So I could also go in here and I could rotate those to be the correct direction. So if I went in and double clicked on this, since I softened the edges, I can go to View and Hidden Geometry, and now I can select those faces. So without that on, it's harder to select the individual faces. But now I can right click and Texture Position and then rotate that to be the correct direction. Like that. And then you could do it for all the sides too. Usually that's not like the best way to do it though. Like I said, I'm not sure why these would be acting weird. Usually what I do if I'm doing this and I want the wood to look like it's going the correct way is I will make two versions of the same material. So I would go here to the SketchUp material editor and I would go to in model. Then I would find that material right here and I'd right click on it and duplicate it. Oh, right there. You gotta select it and then click duplicate right there. And then this one would be Oakwood 2. All right, so I have two versions of the same thing. And then in the material editor, I would make sure that one is rotated 90 and one is rotated 0. So this one I'm going to set to 90. And then I'm going to apply it to these faces. All these little faces here. And again, for some reason, it's not working quite right. Well, there it looks right. So in the, yeah, I don't know what's going on. In the SketchUp viewport, it looks wrong, but in Enscape, it looks correct. So you can see the wood grain is going in the correct direction there. Let's see if it'll let me. Okay, so see how that wood grain there is going in the wrong direction? But then if I go here in SketchUp and I orbit around, I don't know why on earth mine is doing this. Hopefully it doesn't do it on yours. But if I apply that material to this face here now, see what that does, and it makes it look correct. And then here in the viewport, it still looks wrong. So you just want to get all those little faces on the top and bottom, and it'll look right. So that'll look like a proper edge banding going all the way around. And now at this point, I can start tweaking the actual reflections. So if I make it look a little bit glossier, right? And play with how those reflections are working. So, and then even adjusting the like intensity of that bump to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So you can kind of go around and play with the materials like that. And really, I should have done this before I copied and duplicated that material. So now I would have to go into the second one and make the same edits, which isn't a big deal, but like you usually want to make all the edits and get the material looking correct and then go in and then copy it so that everything is the same. But that's an easy way to just get the materials like looking correct, like around the edges of stuff. So now that looks like a lot better. But yeah, that's really all there is to creating these materials. It's just a matter of going in and making them like this, putting in the textures and tweaking these like little settings and stuff, and then seeing how they look within the actual model themselves. And now I'm going to tweak this wood floor just a little bit, and then I'm going to cut the video. So I'm going to go back in here and go all the way back out and select that, and then go into my Enscape material editor. And now I'm going to kind of tweak some stuff about this wood floor. So maybe I'm going to give it a little bit of a tint. And then go to my advanced settings and adjust that so it looks more believable. And then turn my roughness down a little bit. So yeah, something more like that. So now this isn't like the best wood floor texture in the world. I usually like to source my own materials so that I can get things that look a little bit nicer than this. But for what is built into Enscape, you know, it's decent if you just want to like, especially if you just want to use it like in the very beginning stages, just for like getting an idea of how everything looks, and then going back in later and swapping out the textures and stuff for things that look more high quality and realistic. But really that's the workflow. It's just working over here within Enscape, dragging in assets, taking a look at the materials that are applied to things, and then assigning the materials and then tweaking them within your like Enscape material editor. So I think off camera, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap all this up, and I'm going to apply all the rest of the materials to this model and tweak it and getting it looking as good as I can. And then next week, I'm going to kind of maybe show you some more material techniques, and then we'll get more into the rendering portion of the module. So that's going to be it. Just keep working on your individual files, and at this point they should all be modeled. It's just going to be a matter of putting in some of the extra entourage and then doing like materials and stuff. But just play around with it and just get an idea of how Enscape works, and then we'll pick it up from there next week.